The special board meeting for Desert Community College District Board of Trustees is now called to order at 2 p.m. You may join today's meeting in person or join via Zoom webinar. These links are accessible by visiting our College of the Desert homepage. Roll call.
Trustee Kinnaman.
Present.
Trustee Sanchez Fulton. Trustee Meyer. Trustee Perez. Here. Trustee Oden.
Present. Let us stand and we'll ask Dean Maldonado if he'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the special board meeting on May 15th, 2026? Seeing none, the agenda stands as presented. Public comments.
We have had no requests for public comment.
Okay, then seeing none. At this time, I would like to welcome Dr. Debbie D. Thomas, who is joining us as our facilitator for today's board retreat. We are pleased to welcome her back to the College of the Desert as she has facilitated last year's board retreat. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you very much for letting me come back.
Okay, I'll continue. Dr. DeThomas brings a wealth of experience in California's community college system. Her career began in the K-12 setting and transitioned into higher education at Riverside Community College, where she held numerous leadership positions, including interim president of Norco College, interim vice chancellor of student services and operations. She later served as superintendent president of Barstow Community College until her retirement in 2017. Since then, she has remained actively involved at the state and national level, mentoring current and aspiring CEOs, facilitating accreditation and effectiveness teams, and supporting institutions in areas such as governance, diversity, equity and inclusion, and resource allocation. Dr. DeThomas will now guide us through a review of the 2026 board self-evaluation results, and later will facilitate a dialogue about best practices in board governance. We'll now turn it over to you, and thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you again for allowing me to be here. And it's nice to see everybody and be out at College of the Desert again. First, I'd like to just have you go through the materials that were provided to you. The packet from ACCT, you'll see, has a session evaluation. This is the evaluation of me, not your whole board meeting. So when you, at the end of the meeting, when you do that, if you would give it to Joy, I think, and she will return it directly to ACCT, okay? And then you see the second sheet on that side of the folder is a list of resources that ACCT provides throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
And since that was one of the areas that you did say you wanted to have continued professional development, this is one of the options that you can consider, along with the other ones like CCLC and some of the other agencies that provide board leadership. And then on the other side of the packet are the materials that will help you understand more from the presentation that we go through together. And I just want to talk through real quickly. The first one is the fiduciary duty handout. We will talk about that during the presentation, and you have this as for yourself to look at later. And then the discourage partisan politics. That's one of the best practices of boards. that you recognize that you serve your whole community, not one particular segment of your community. And it's a best practice of community colleges in general. So that's a handout that we would like for you to also read. And then I talked to you when I was here last year about the affirmation of service, but for community college trustees. Most of the colleges that I work with now have put into board policy that they will reaffirm their commitment to their role at their annual meeting. And I looked to see if you put that in. We talked about it last year and it's not on your board policies yet. So I did want to bring it up again and give you a copy of it. And then we are going to talk about the intersection of board work, which is the policy level, governance level, and then consultation where you have a shared responsibility with the administration. And then the administration, it didn't all fit on here, but I'm going to also give you a PDF of the presentation. And so you'll have a slide on that. And then the last handout is ACCT's roles and responsibilities of governing boards. And that's for you. We're going to talk about all of these, but it's for you to have to read later so that you have notes on it also. And then you have materials from College of the Desert, and that is your board goals from 20, I think it's 24, 26, okay? And then you have an update from the college on how the college is doing towards its goals, and then your last two goals. The first like 10 goals of your, well, really it's 2 goals with a lot of bullets under the goals, but those are the college goals and they tie directly to your college strategic plan. And your role as trustees is to monitor, support, allocate funds when necessary, approve items that have to do with these goals, all those different board roles. But the last 2 goals are your goals. Those are board internal governance goals, and we're going to talk about those. You've met one of them because you hired your permanent president, so that one's done. The second one is about accreditation, and from what I've heard from all of you and from the report here, you've made significant progress in resolving any of the issues that you had with ACCJC accreditation. So what you want to do throughout this meeting today is jot some notes to yourselves when something comes up that you think, oh, that might be a good goal for next year. And I'm going to call your attention to them when I think of them from what you've said in the evaluation and from what I've heard from you in the interviews that I was able to do before this meeting. One of the outcomes of this meeting is the drafting of board goals. That's difficult to do at the dais with everybody discussing. Most colleges have a subcommittee of the board draft their goals and then bring a recommendation to the board and you have that conversation. And so you might decide that's how you want to do it when we get to that point. But at least outcome of this meeting should be some ideas for possible board internal governance goals. I'm not talking about the college goals. Those have to tie to what the college says and what you have approved in the strategic plan. And those are based on data and analysis of that data, and that will require a conversation with the college. But the internal governance goals, those are how can we improve as a board and how can we improve as individual trustees? So those are the ones that I'd like to concentrate on as we go through this presentation. Okay, so if you'll just jot down notes to yourself, if something comes up that you think, hey, this might be a good goal for us to have. And then we have 3 parts to our meeting today. One of them is the overview of your board self-evaluation, and then and that should lead to some thinking about goals because this is you evaluating yourselves as a board. And then the second part is a discussion of board best practices and best practices of high functioning boards. And that should give you some ideas of things that as you listen and as we discuss, you would think, hey, we do a really good job with that, or that might be an area where we could improve a little bit. And then the last part of the meeting is that discussion of what do we want to include in our goals? And again, concentrating on the internal governance goals. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll move to the evaluation. And actually, I need my PowerPoint up to do the overview, okay? You all have a copy of it, and it was attached to the agenda for this meeting. And we are going to go through the hard copy that you have now. I hope you had a chance to at least review the electronic copy before you came. But if not, we're going to hit the high points of this evaluation and discuss it. I will start out by telling you, I do these nationally, and I have been doing work with ACCT since I retired in 2017. This is the best self-evaluation that I've seen of a board. You gave yourself higher marks than I've seen at any other college, okay? If you are doing all of these things that you say you're doing, you're a high-functioning board, all right? But I do want you to think as we go through this evaluation that are there any areas where we could improve? Because you did rate yourselves really high on all of the items. You had 26 items in this survey that every trustee gave a 5, which is the highest that you could give. And it means there's no room for improvement. So that's a lot. So and I can do this now, right? Yes. No, I don't know enough to know that, but I think you need to ask yourselves that. So we already reviewed this part. So I want to just at the high level point out some things and you did this evaluation, so these will be reminders, but there are key findings on page 4 that we're going to look at. And then there's highlights and summaries from 5 to 13 that we're going to look at. And then the results by topic. On pages 15 to 34 is part 1. Part 1 is where you were asked to evaluate the whole board on characteristics of good governance. Part 2 is 35 to 44. And in those items, you were asked to evaluate yourself on your role as a trustee, as an individual, okay? In both cases, you rated them 1 to 5. The only difference was the first part of it was you agreed or disagreed to varying degrees. And then in the second part, there were a little bit different. You agreed, disagreed, were satisfied, or confident in your own behavior as an individual trustee. And then there's a table after each item for parts 1 and 2, both of them. There's a table that displays each item and its average rating. And you'll see when we go through these, the average ratings are very high. And then there are 2 charts following the table, and those are the average rating for each item in that category, and then the average rating the rating for each trustee. It's really important that we put the ratings for each trustee, because when you're not homogeneous in your ratings, it tells us that there are 1 or 2 or even 3 trustees who think there's some improvement needed in this area. So it's important to see that if everybody rated it pretty much the same, or if there were some 1s and 2s and then 5s, and that averaged out to still a decent rating. That's a different story than all 4s, okay? And then we had the board's comments. We ask you if you rated an item 2 or 1 that you make a comment. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it didn't. There really were very few comments, so I listed them here just for you to see, but it's better as we go through the report that you look at the comments, because then they're in context. So there were these 4 comments, and then there were these 6 or 7 comments. There were a couple of comments in the report that actually dealt with the president's evaluation. And the president's evaluation is a closed session item, so we're not going to discuss those here. That will be discussed when you actually do the president's evaluation. And I know you'll be doing that in the next couple of months, I believe. I know you already
It's in
talked
process
to
right now.
ACCT about it. So it'll be pretty soon. So, right? Yeah, good. So I did not put them up on the screen here, and we won't talk about those except in one case where I already talked to Val and he thinks that we should talk about that as a board. So on pages 45 and through 47, you had a chance to answer some open-ended questions, and you'll see the exact responses from the different trustees. But here's a synopsis of it. In the question of greatest strengths, is you all said that you work together really well as a cohesive unit. You respect each other and the president. You have good communication and a great understanding of the community that you serve. I also heard that from the three trustees that I was able to have a conversation with and from your president. For major accomplishments of the board, you noted professional development and on-board roles, progress towards accreditation, increased enrollment, which is one of the college goals, and then strengthened support for the superintendent president. In the areas where you said the board could improve, you indicated clearer expectations and communication, continued onboarding and training, consistent messaging, and maintaining a strong public perception of board work. And then on the one or two most important changes you think could improve your board, there were so many various responses. It wasn't homogeneous, so we'll look at those. And then a real change from last year, on page 47, we asked you to give us 3 to 5 issues that you feel the board should make its priorities for the coming year. And usually those lead to good discussions about board goals, because you said you thought you should prioritize them. Last year, there was a lot of homogeneous responses. You wanted a permanent president. 5 out of 5 said that as one of their 2 to 3 priorities. 5 out of 5 said we need to focus on students. 5 out of 5 said we need some improvement in board internal governance. 4 out of the 5 of you said implement the strategic plan. And then you can see 3 said fiscal security, 2 said management stability, and 1 said auxiliary. So it was easy for me to group those. This year, you didn't. This year, there was only 1 item where 3 trustees mentioned it, and that was specifically referring to enrollment increases, with dual enrollment being mentioned specifically by one of the trustees. The other 3 items that were at least mentioned by okay, it's great. We're good. If I can, now my thing's not working. Okay, no, it's not working.
You got to aim to that.
Sorry, buddy. So you're
Okay. So there wasn't. Okay. So, so this year, 2 people said focus on serving underrepresented minority male populations, and then advocacy and community involvement was mentioned by 2, and facilities/construction mentioned by 2. The remainder were mentioned 1 time out of all of the responses. So we'll look at those and we'll see which ones are important to you as the board as a whole. Okay, so now we can bring up the actual document, but I'd like for you to look, and this is not a lecture. This is really a discussion from here on out for the evaluation. So if you see something that you want to call attention to, please call attention to it. If something jumps out at you that you think the rest of the board needs to discuss more fully, other than issues that are more appropriate for the president's evaluation, then please just say, let's talk about that a little bit, okay? So I'm going to take you page by page through it, and I'll tell you some of the things that that jumped out at me. And if you look, we'll start, if it's okay with everyone, on page 4, which is the key findings. And you see that your average for your evaluation was a 4.7 across the whole survey. That's very, very high, okay? And then the highest rated category is your policy direction. And you rated that as a category, you rated that a 4.93. There were only a couple of people who did not give items in that category a 5. The lowest category, which was still high, is institutional effectiveness, and that was a 4.4. 26 items, like I said, were a 5. No item fell below a 4.0, which is basically unheard of in self-evaluations. There's always at least a few items that fall below that. So then looking, unless somebody else wants to make a comment on that page. Okay, so looking at the next page, page 5, you see part 1, the average for part 1 was 4.65, and all of them above a 4.0. And the next page shows you the average for part 2, and that was even higher. That was a 4.75. So you rated the board as a whole very high, and then you rated yourself as individual trustees even higher, which is really great if when you're thinking about it, that really represents what you think, because you're the ones who know how you are as an individual trustee. Nobody really knows that but you. Everybody else sees the external part of it, but you know internally what you're thinking and trying and feeling and hoping that you're doing as a trustee. Okay? So highest rated items are listed on page 7, and this is for the whole part 1 and in both part 1 and 2. It's all of the highest rated items. Those are all a 5.0. You can see where you rated yourself on really high. Your periodic review of and evaluation of your policies, which we are going to talk about a little bit in here in the other part of the discussion. But you can just see all of the things that you said. Once a decision is made, board members cease debate and uphold the decision of the board. That's amazing. If you guys are doing that most of the time in most districts, when you really feel strongly about something, it's a difficult thing to then say, okay, I'm only one of 5. The majority ruled, and I'm going to support that decision. And that's also a national best practice for governing boards. Because the worst thing you can do is walk out of a meeting and say, well, I didn't want to do that. I didn't support that, like to the media or to staff, because it presents a divided board. And it just is a national best practice to go ahead and do what you're saying that you do. That's fantastic. And it definitely shows that you have good support of your administrative team, because very few of those can be done alone. So as a board. And then on page 2, you see the rest of the items that had 5.0 in part 2. And you see a lot of those. You just want to look at those and just see how if you agree, you understand the reserves, you understand the financial statements, you understand the audit report, you understand the college's accountability to state government, and you understand property acquisition and management. And I'll tell you, I was president and, pretty high positions in community college for a lot of years. And I had to depend on my CBO. I had to be able to ask questions every time something came up. So those are things that, if you really have a good understanding of those, that's fantastic. If you don't, those are some areas where study sessions, and I heard at the board meeting today, because I watched your board meeting before I came, and I heard some great questions and some phenomenal responses from the college in respect to some of the financial things that you were voting on. And that's perfect. That's exactly what should happen. And there was no animosity, no anything. It was, you had a request and the staff said, and the president said, that's something we can talk about at a study session. That's a perfect way to handle any questions you have. So these are great. If you get the answers you need when you need them, you deserve a 5. So that's fantastic. Okay, so category averages we already talked about, but you see a picture of it on page 9 where all of them are above a 4.0, and that's the different categories that the evaluation asks you about. And I'm on page 9, and you can see board organization, 4.57. It's the blue what is that rectangle on the chart? And then the policy role is red next to it, all of them above a 4.0 again. So on the chart below that, I'd like you to just look at the increase, the ones that increased over last year. Board president relations increased the most by a full point. Last year it was 3.75, this year 4.75. And then board leadership increased 0.86 from 3.74 to 4.6. And then the last increase was the board organization of 0.29. Okay. And then these are still highlights of the report. So on page 10, you see community and state relations has the highest rating and the board president relations, the lowest rating. But again, a 4.5 out of 5 is a pretty high rating for any category. And all of them have gone up in this section over last year. And then individual trustee averages, one trustee a 5 all the way across everything. And then one a 4.29, which was the lowest. And that was for the evaluations of yourself in part 2. So if you just another picture of this, if you look at the blue and the red together, those are on pages 12 and 13, the blue and the red pieces of the pie together are what represents above a 4 or a 5. So almost all of the responses are either a 4 or a 5. Very few in any of the other categories. So then we get into the results. Does anybody want to say anything else about that first part, the overview?
Anyone? Okay, we can continue.
Okay. So then we go into the results by category, and the first one is board organization. And like I said earlier, what we learn from each other the most is the comments, okay? So if you look, this is one of the ones, the first one should be in the president's eval, so we won't talk about that one right now. But the second one, the board needs to be courteous to minority opinions, not badger the minority into changing their opinion just to make it unanimous. Usually you want board agreement that this is an issue. In this one though, if a person feels that way, you don't want as a board anybody to feel that way. So if that's an issue for one trustee, that's an issue that you might want to pay attention to. And there's different things to consider as you talk about that. But if that's an issue for one trustee, that might be an issue where you want to make sure that you're not. You do need, as an individual trustee, to be aware of after the issue has been resolved and the rest of the board feels it's been resolved, that trustee also has a responsibility to be able to move on with the majority opinion, but not feel belittled into doing that. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything about that? Okay. So I will move on then. So on the page 16, you can see what I was talking about before on the second chart, where you can see the difference in trustee ratings On a lot of the items, you'll see they're all 4 or 5s. In this one, you see one trustee rated one item, one question a 2 and one a 1. So question 4 was a 2 and question 7 was a 1. If you look back at page 15, question 2, the board members uphold the final majority of decision of the board. One person gave that a rating of a 2. So wait, no, that's not right, because that was those were the individual trustees, but not the question. Yeah, no, it was question 4. I'm sorry. The board considers and respect minority opinions, which we already talked about. And then question 7, meeting agenda items contain sufficient background and information recommended for the board. One person had a 1 on that. So that's one where the board as a whole would direct the administration. And if the board as a whole feels that there's enough data, enough information presented, then the board as a whole directs the president, not an individual trustee. Do you see the difference between those two and why that's so important? And do you agree? It's a national best practice, but you also need to agree to that as a board. Does anybody want to say anything about that? You're awfully quiet.
Anyone?
Okay.
Joe, you look like you want to say something.
Okay. So we're good? Okay. One of the things that the one comment on page 17 was the board reviews policies on a systematic basis. And I am going to talk about this more. You obviously have a really good policy within the college. But I do want to talk about that when we get into national best practices. Okay. And I know that issue also came up at the board meeting today. And I want to explore that a little bit further, with one policy being in a consent item that one trustee wanted to look at more. And it was a first read. I realize that, but we do need to talk about that when we get into the best practices discussion. On this page 19, again, there were a couple of items that, a couple of pieces of items where they really apply to the president's evaluation, but one of them is one that you as a board need to have agreement on, and that is the one about the trustees serve the community and the president's job is the college and he should not be political outside of the college. Now, I'm going to say what national best practice is, but I have a slide in my presentation that I'll talk to you about later. National best practices are national best practices, but there are different ways of doing things. Everybody doesn't do everything the same way. So you have to agree on how you're going to do something. Normally, and nationally, best practices, I do searches with colleges, community college districts and individual community colleges. And we develop the profile with the college. And I have not seen one yet where a part of the president's job was they didn't have it in there. I'm saying this so it comes out negative, but in every evaluation, a part of the president's job is to be in the community and to forge partnerships, to get to know the community and the needs of the community. The president's the only one who can make commitments on behalf of the college as an individual. No individual board member can do that. Individual board members also have a huge role in the community. Individual board members usually know more people than the president, we came up through education usually, and board members usually didn't. Some did, but some didn't. And they have contacts and they have knowledge and they have friends and they have avenues that they can go down that will help the president be able to do what the board has directed the president to do. So it's a partnership. It's not an either or. But for the trustees, one of the major best practices is that nobody's out there on their own just doing what they want to do. that you have agreed as a board on what your messaging is and who is going to be where and what you're going to be doing. The president can ask you to join him when he's doing something, especially if it's in your area. And that's a best practice to do that because you were elected by that area and it brings goodwill to the college. So those are great things for the president to do. But to say that it's not the president's job is against national best practice. But I want you to discuss that because it needs to be a unified messaging from the board and an understanding amongst the trustees of what your expectation of the president is. And you might continue this discussion also in the president's eval, not here, but part of this is what's the board's role in community relations and advocacy. And you are the reason we created that partisan politics handout that I gave you, because I called ACCT and said, what do we have that we can give them about the trustees' role and what it is in the community. And that's what we created, just to be able to give you some direction. But I'm going to turn it over to you to have a little bit of a discussion about that. Does anybody have anything, especially if you totally disagree with what I said, which is okay?
Whether or not we want to see our president out in the community, I definitely would like to see him out in the community establishing relationships, and especially since we have satellite campuses, I think it's important for us to establish good relationships with those municipalities, but not only in the ones where we have satellite campuses, because we serve the entire Coachella Valley. So to be out there, I think is a good thing.
Okay.
Not to the point where the campus is neglected,
Right,
but certainly out there.
sure.
I would
Other
agree with that.
trustees?
I would agree with that statement as well. When I first got elected, I kind of had a different opinion about it, but I think through trainings and through learning more about what the role and what my role is as a trustee, I agree. I think the CEO, superintendent president, is the face of the college, and we're more so behind the scenes making policy decisions. So I definitely want the CEO to be out there in the community, making relationships, ensuring that there's more opportunities for our students coming to the college. And I think he does do a pretty good job of, whenever he is in our area, of inviting us to whatever community meeting that may be, or to whatever event that it may be within our district boundaries.
But conversely, also, we owe it to him to let him know what we're doing. Now, for example, everybody here knows I'm a crazy Firebirds fan. Inevitably, not every game, but every other game, somebody comes up and starts talking to me about the college, and I'm careful as a board member of that conversation. If there's something meaty in there, for example, with John Page, I always let the president of the college know, hey, I met John Page. Here's what he brought up. Here's what he asked. We need to follow up on that. But we need to let him know our activities in the valley, our friends, our relationships, so that he can put a big matrix together and figure out, okay, who's who in the zoo, where do they fit?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because that's a national best practice too. Do you want to say anything?
Since I'm prompted. No, I agree with my colleagues, especially in Coachella Valley. Coachella Valley, this is one of the largest institutions in the valley, and it's important that the CEO, the face of this institution, is known and it is seen, because this institution, I mean, it's the primary educational hub within the valley. And, in some districts, you find where the percentage of the time the CEO is more external. And oftentimes they'll have an executive vice president or something that's dealing with operations. So there's all different types of models of that. But he has enough time in the day, since he has 24 hours a day, to do both. And so, I completely support him being the face of the college, and also to the level he needs to be in operations. And you're welcome.
Great. Yeah, one more. Do you want to add anything to the conversation?
No, I think that's enough.
No. Trustee Mary, do you want to add anything to the conversation? No, you're okay?
Perhaps if we could hear from the president, how he sees our role in the
Okay,
community.
good.
Well, I think the comment was made in here that said some of the effect if I should not be, or making you aware. I think I've sent you a memo in the last couple of weeks identifying who I may have spoken to the community. This last week I didn't because I knew I was gonna be meeting with you. We could share some of that information, but I'll continue to do that. What I really enjoy is the freedom to be able to meet with certain council members or chamber members to have discussions that are not decision-making, they're just fact-finding. And listen to complaints and or concerns, and then start to develop how we as an executive team are going to address that. And then if it arises to your level, then let you know, hey, this is an issue, like we've had a parking lot issue, let's just say hypothetically, and talking about how we're looking to resolve that issue, things like that. So I really enjoyed that flexibility, and I would continue to enjoy that flexibility. And I think that's something that we do very well and it's in your area. I talked to you about it, what's coming up, what's happened. But I really enjoy that freedom, that latitude.
Great. You don't wanna say- Conversation? No? Are we okay moving on then? This might be something you continue the conversation either with a goal as board goal in communication, making sure everybody knows what everybody else is doing, or in the president's eval to give clear direction to the president so that everyone understands what the expectations of the president are and the president knows what you want from him. Okay? Okay, so if you can turn now to 23, are we okay? Or did you?
Well, I was going to mention one thing in this
Sure.
response. He shouldn't be political outside of the college. I didn't write this, but it could be a different thing of shouldn't be engaged into the politics of the valley versus the face of the college. And I don't know whether that was the intent when this was written, but there's that little nuance there.
Right.
He has to walk down the middle politically, of course, for the most part. So again, when I read that, I didn't know whether there was a little nuance to that we weren't picking up on.
So we're just reinforcing what we said before, that politics shouldn't really enter into community college because we serve everybody. Is that
Right.
just-
I mean, I don't think that our president wants to be out there endorsing city council members and things like that, is what I'm saying.
Yes, yes,
And I didn't know whether
for
that was the nuance that was maybe
Yes.
written in here.
a best practice.
Yeah, we'll do that.
You agree, President? Val,
Well, with that comment too, neither board members should not also.
what's that?
Board members should not also.
Yeah, and it's hard because you're trustees and you're citizens, but you have to remember that you're always a trustee, that everybody knows you're a trustee. And when you speak, even if you preface it with, I'm just speaking as a regular citizen, you're not. You're speaking as a trustee for a pretty high profile college in this region. And so that's a good point. Okay. And again, you can continue this conversation. Okay. So if you could turn to page 23, okay. You gave a 5 to yourselves on 22. The board sets clear expectations for the president superintendent, but this is one of those areas that was a little bit confusing. So I would say make sure that you clarify this so that you're happy with what the president is doing in that area, because he's doing what you have as a full board directed him to do. Okay. And then,
Maybe can I make an
You-
observation?
pardon me?
Can I make an observation?
Yes, sir.
21?
Yes.
Mutual trust and respect. I just want to comment on, or just make the observation that was a significant jump from last year to this year.
Yes. Good observation. And that's great. That's one of the most important things in a relationship is trust. So it was good to see that you have gone up in that area, and it's very high. You seemed like your standards for college operations were all rated really high and there were no comments recorded. So we'll go to page 27, institutional effectiveness. This was the lowest category in the survey. But you ranked all the items high. The only one that actually decreased was the board reviews accountability reports to the state and federal agencies. And that's funny because you did give yourselves a 5 in the board is knowledgeable about state and national issues and related reporting. So if there's an issue in that area, then you guys need to talk about it. But still, it's a 4.0, which is above average. So you're obviously doing a good idea. I'm just not sure why it went down because there were no comments. Okay, and that might be something that it's, everybody just rated it a 4. Actually, that item 31, there were one person rated it a 2 and one a 3, but they didn't give any comments, so we don't know why. But if there is an issue, that would be a good thing to talk about as a board. Okay. The other ones, the only question I have was, how do you do that? And if you know how you do that, that's great. And usually it's done by the college. They bring you the work. You monitor the effectiveness through the reports of the college. So it's obvious you're pretty satisfied with those reports.
If I can just make a comment, I'm curious to know why, I mean, obviously this is anonymous and what have you, but we go through our audit reports, every year, and we go through them pretty thoroughly. They're always clean. So I'm curious as to why it is that we might have gone down, especially because there are no comments reported. But I mean, we submit all of our audits and they're all tip top. So it's a little confusing to me.
And institutional effectiveness accountability reports are beyond the financial. They're also student success data that goes to the state chancellor's office, all kinds of reporting. Right. It's still a really valid question. And yeah, if anybody wants to
I
speak
think
to
it was-
why.
I'm reading the question again, and to me, it's a little ambiguous what the accountability reports are that we should expect to review.
So
I'm sure there's some that just fly through because they're standard operating procedure, but there's others that are important for us to be aware of. And I think the question wasn't deep enough to tell us what we should be seeing.
So that might be a good study session in and of itself. The college has a ton of reporting requirements, but even just a discussion of what they are and what are especially important for the board to pay attention to. And one is the audit report.
Maybe it would be good to have, as a professor, I think it's always good to have an orientation and develop an orientation for the Board of Trustees. This is something I've been requesting. And having our APs or BPs and just having a highlight of what financial records are the top priority when we ask those questions. Because I was a news trustee and I would constantly ask questions. It would be wonderful if we make a binder to have this for an orientation and have what to look for and highlight the best practices for the finance. These are the top. So we don't even sometimes have to ask redundant questions. They're in our board, but a highlight of what is important for that we should be. There's actually the book. I brought the book of an effective trusteeship, and that has helped me. But I would love to have for the future, like a training book. And I think that's really important. What true financial statements should we like a highlight? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what,
Okay.
and I'm gonna give you I agree with you on one aspect and I disagree on one. And the one I totally agree with you on, and I wrote it in my notes, you need an orientation for trustees.
Yeah.
It's a hard job. And if you don't have an orientation and somebody just learns by doing, you miss too much. So that's one thing that definitely should happen, and you should have a board policy on it, and it should be standard. And since you haven't done one, to my knowledge, everybody should go through it and help with it so that you all have a shared understanding of what the role of a trustee is. Part of it's this training, but part of it is specific to College of the Desert, your policies and what you're reporting and all of that. But the second part that I really strongly disagree with is if questions come from you to you, you shouldn't answer them. Your reference with a question about the college is, I'm going to give that to the president, because you delegate that authority to the president, and the president, because your example was financial questions.
No, no, no. I was talking
Oh.
about at the board meeting.
Ah.
We get at a board of trustees, they send us the board and we get the financials. That's how
Oh,
I was
okay.
referring to. I'm not talking in the public. I'm talking
Yeah.
about an actual
Okay,
the financials that we get.
okay,
And just to answer his question, there's a lot of financial items that we get in our board packet.
right.
It would be nice to have a highlight for the board of trustee to get what are the key, like quarterly financials. So, I mean, something in our actual board that we should be looking at. The accredited, there's certain.
Okay.
that's
I
what
thought you were saying,
No, I
if you got a
wasn't.
question from somebody in the community.
No, not at all.
that question,
Not at
you
all.
Go,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
okay, great.
No, we could.
Perfect.
No.
We're gonna problem solve right now. I'm thinking, send the board a memo highlighting financials.
Mhm.
This is,
Yeah,
that's what I was referring to.
even
Perfect.
monthly, things that go.
Perfect.
Well, maybe not even just financials, but student success factors, et cetera,
Absolutely.
that we need to
Right.
be tracking.
Absolutely. Because the people who make reports know them back and forth, but
Yes.
we,
That's-
even as president, you have to know enough to know the right questions to ask of your people who know the most about that issue. And so that's the same with the board. They need to help you understand the reports. And if you don't understand them, it's okay to say, this is a lot of information and I need some help. And they'll help you. They're great.
And I can give you a real example. I'm on the subcommittee of the bond. I really, and I want to share this report that I was given. I keep on asking at every board meeting, are we doing business with local vendors? Are we doing business with local minority and women-owned business? These are well, the gentleman answered the whole question.
Mhm.
I need my board members, that same presentation should be brought to the Board of Trustees because it tells us I never knew that.
Mhm.
And I've been here 9 years.
And that was a directive of the board. You made a decision as a board that you are going to, you are going to seek, okay, then that's exactly right. If it's the whole board that directed that, then that should be addressed. And I heard that question. I thought the answer was great. And you should have already known that if that was a directive of the board. So that's great. In the future, that will be included. Okay? Perfect. Nice of you guys to all be here so that we can get some of these things ironed out without having them, wait a while. So thank you. On a Friday afternoon. So are we okay moving then to the next? Okay, so the next category, there were again some twos. No, wait, I was referring back to that one. This one, you have one incident that happened a year ago, and even the person who wrote it said it was resolved. Just it's definitely a best practice, and it's in your own code of ethics that you don't talk about anything that's confidential outside of closed session when your whole board is convened with anyone else than your fellow trustees and your whoever's in that closed session with you. But even outside of closed session, you shouldn't be talking about it with other members of the board because you never know who else is around or who might see it, or even if it's electronic communication, who might get a hold of it. So best practice, talk about it in closed session and don't talk about it outside of closed session. But there is some confidential information too that you are privy to because you are a trustee that should not be discussed with anyone else, even if it's outside of closed session. So just a best practice, no discussion of any of the information, confidential information that you hear. So the next category is advocating for the college. The overall rating is a 4.76, up from last year. The comments are about the foundation. I wrote down on mine, maybe a goal on this. If you feel like you're not doing enough or you don't know enough with the foundation, if the whole board feels this, then you might set a goal of working closely with the foundation to see what else the board can do to support them. Our foundations in our community colleges are amazing and give so many scholarships to our students that any good communication between our board and our foundation is tremendous. Okay. Then on the next page, this one, page 33, this is board education. And that's where the comment was to improve the onboarding process for trustees and CEOs. And for the trustees, especially, let's talk about that here. You might want to talk about onboarding with Val when you're in. Sorry, Val, can we go by first names here, or do you want me to?
Please.
Okay, thank you. And in the evaluation piece, just to see, if he was satisfied with it and if anything needs to change. But for your board evaluation, you need the president and the board involved in it, because the trustees know what the expectations of them are and what they didn't know going into the job and what made it harder for them. And the president knows what the trustees need to know about the college, because part of the orientation is an orientation to the college and all of the work that goes on at the college.
I can speak to this because I was a new trustee as Val was brought on as a new interim president, all at the same time. I felt it unfair to dump on Val and said, okay, give me an orientation when he himself is doing that to his new job. So I took it on myself, talked to Val about, okay, I want to have meetings with the vice presidents, learn about their jobs, and that helped a lot. So I built my own orientation plan.
Right.
Nothing was given to me at the time.
And just so everyone knows, I've forwarded to Ron for early review. We drafted a orientation manual.
Great.
It's still not well developed, but I was going to present it to the board members probably later this summer. Neil's been working on it. And so we'll be giving you something in the next couple of months.
Should
Wonderful.
we take that into mine and Ruben's little committee?
Yes, you can.
Oh, we need, no.
Volunteering us here.
Val, would it include the financial, what we just discussed about highlighting finance?
Yeah, it would.
Thank you. I just want to make
I
it
think
clear.
it's comprehensive.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't reinvent the wheel if I were you. There are some really good sample orientations for trustees that other colleges have in policy. You might want to look at those. And ACCT Connect now has a policy section where we have sample policies on there. And if you see that there's one missing, you just tell us, tell Colleen, tell me, and I'll tell Colleen that we need a policy sample in this area because trustees are asking for it. Because we really want to help boards. That's your primary role, is to set your policy. So we want to help you be able to do that as simply as possible.
I sat through a session at one of these conferences where the state of Washington presented their new trustee boot camp. And every new trustee has to go through this boot camp. At the time, it was being managed and run by Bellevue College. But I
Yes.
have not seen anything from our CCLC organization.
I think they do have a new trustee orientation, but
They have a book for sure.
do they?
This is a whole boot camp and it goes for the whole year as a new trustee. It takes you step by step. Each month
Yeah,
it's a little
no,
different
it's
thing.
great. I work with Washington. I
Yeah.
think it's phenomenal.
If I may, trustee Meyer, ACCT, when I became a new trustee back in the day, does that not exist anymore? The new trustee orientation was a 3-day workshop as a new trustee.
Went to that. I did go to that.
Okay. That was pretty-
ACCT does that.
that's
too.
the one that was for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, I went to that when I
Okay.
came in. But I'm
But
talking this is
even
a
if you get
year-long
a-
thing that they put you through.
California, I get you.
Yeah. But even if you get a phenomenal orientation about being a trustee in general terms from even us at ACCT, you still need an orientation to College of the Desert.
Yes.
You need to
Absolutely.
know from your vice presidents and deans, directors, whoever the president feels needs to talk to you, you need to know what goes on in the different areas of the college. Okay? So part of it's the external, just in general, what's the role of a trustee? What are the best practices? All that. And part of it is, what do I need to know here at COD? And what do my policies say?
Something that I went through as a new trustee, President Kinman gave us an org chart. He kind of outlined
Yes.
everything for,
Absolutely.
and that would be so phenomenal. So I kind of knew which department went under. I remember that.
See, and that might be a goal.
Organizational chart?
Yes, that helped me tremendously.
So these are all suggestions. Again, a subcommittee working with the president on a draft orientation, asking all of the trustees to submit their ideas, and then bringing orientation to the board for approval in policy would be fantastic. Okay? We ready? So just, everybody should have jotted that down as one of our goals, right? Okay, are we okay moving on?
Yes.
Okay, so next page, page
Oh, there
30.
was one more that, I'm sorry. It was in regards to always have I know we can go online and look at our APs and BPs. I brought that to your attention. But
Right,
the processes of, we have, what's beautiful about California is shared governance. It comes from our faculty, it comes from, we have so many different areas. However, I would like to see how the Board of Trustees could give the input. Remember, I discussed that.
right.
So I would love that.
Can we
Mhm.
hold that just till we get to best practices?
Oh.
Because we're going to talk about policy there.
Okay.
But I very much want you to bring that back up when we're in that discussion, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So if everybody's okay, we'll move to the next page, which is page 35. And that is board member responsibilities, part 2. We're starting part 2. The only one, well, there were a couple that decreased, but differentiating between board policy and administrative procedure decreased by 0.35, which is significant on yours because there wasn't much movement. And that's an issue that is usually an issue with boards. That's where boards get into trouble, getting into the operations of the college. And so we are going to talk about that more with best practices, and you might even want more training on that or more discussion, a study session yourselves on that. But we'll get to that in the best practices, okay? The next one, board president superintendent relations. It actually, the second one decreased. How to effectively delegate to the president superintendent went down 0.55. So one trustee ranked this a 2, and there were still no comments, and a 2 is the rest ranked at a 5 or a 4. So you can see the 2 is actually what brought it down. But without comments, we're not sure where that is breaking down, what the problem is. Does anybody want to speak to that, or do you want to wait till we get to best practices and we'll hit it then? Okay, and then number 20, one trustee ranked that a 1, which of course is the lowest score. And that's communication protocols with the superintendent president. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to hold that to best practices just because we're going to cover communication protocols. Is everyone okay with that?
Okay.
Okay, great. I'm trying to move forward through this because I know you guys have had a long day.
Thank you.
And and we were supposed to go till 5, and I'm hoping that
We
that
appreciate you.
you just tell me when you're done, okay? And wherever I am, we stop. And if you need a break, you tell us that too, okay? I thought we'd take a short break right when we get through the evaluation, and then we'll come back and do the best practices. Oh, just keep going? Okay. All right. So the comment on page 41, what are we are somewhat shielded from contract negotiations, only to learn of issues when they arise. And same with HR, we only get it when there are lawsuits. Actually, that's very appropriate. Contract negotiations, you set parameters and then the college negotiates within those parameters. And you shouldn't hear of HR problems every time they come up. That's way too much confidential information, way too much into the weeds, and you would be inundated. That's up to your staff to handle. And then when there's a threat of a lawsuit, because that's a responsibility of the board, that's when it comes to the board. So this is actually a really good comment to the positive. Okay.
Okay. In regards, what maybe, we used to have the top 5 litigation, like I would like a heads up on that, since that's part of our responsibility.
Potential litigation
Yes,
is one of the
just
closed session
something
items.
That the little small, I don't want to know. The weeds, the bottom stuff, I just, if there's anything potential that I like what we discussed earlier, I just would like a heads up. I remember several years ago, we used to get a beautiful update of potential, this, what stage are we at? Are we closing? Because when we were in closed session, there were some questions I had that they're still going, but we don't have time to discuss that. So I would just like to say terminated, this is done, that we're in, pending, just something overall. I don't want to know the nitty and gritty. I just want just kind of overall.
I agree with that. Coming out of the industry, I come in, I
Yes.
look at things through a project management lens. Things are green. I don't care to need to know about, yeah, I know they're going on and just kind of let them go. If they're yellow, when they're at the end of yellow going to orange, I want to know about them. When they're red, I need to know about them.
Yeah.
And I work under the concept as trustee Sanchez Fulton. I'm going to give her words, no surprises.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
if all of a sudden something pops up and holy smokes, now we got a fire.
Yeah.
Whereas a month ago, we knew it was coming,
Mhm.
we'd be better prepared to respond to the fire.
This is something I think that we have discussed for a while. And we get a lot of stuff as trustees. And I've sat through so many seminars, webinars, and read so much information from some of these groups. And I've referred a lot of them to my president. But some are contract management, some are designed for legal. So I'm not sure if that's something that the legal department should manage, is how they manage the cases. But we're separate from them. So I'm not sure if we look at some sort of combination or possibly develop our own so that we know where everything is.
So Val, is anything formulating in your mind from what they're saying about something you
Oh,
could?
yeah, I'm going to defer to Eileen on this one, as she's kind of guided me and our kind of stance on some of those. And when I say our stance, I should be referring to legal stance. So Eileen, do you want to chime in? We have her on, Jeff.
Of course, the trustees should know the larger issues as they're coming down the road. There will always be the occasional thing that pops up that is a bit of a surprise, and we try to manage those as best we can, but we can't always give the amount of warning that we would like to give to the trustees. But we can absolutely work with Val to set up an update system and a stat to let the trustees know the status of matters as they're moving along.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi,
Hi,
Debbie.
Lee.
How are you?
Do
Good
that
to see
for
you.
us. Eileen, this is trustee Sanchez Fulton. You used to do that for us several years ago. And it was wonderful because we kind of, I remember that. And I thought that was so neat to have where we're at on that. And it was, and also, let me just explain the concern is sometimes we get verbal. To me, verbal is not good. I need that in writing. When we're doing something of a legal nature, a nice verbal summary isn't enough for the trustees to make a real committed decision on something very important. And we used to have that before, and I would like that to return. Thank you.
Do you take written materials outside of closed
No.
session? Okay. You just want to look at it in closed session,
Then
but
we give it back.
yeah, okay,
That's what
good. So it sounds like you have,
Oh, no, we didn't. Okay, so there's other things. That's not on the agenda. No. That's why it has to be on. Right, but this
So I
is.
didn't fully hear that comment. You're talking, if you're talking about the closed session agenda, you're correct. Once an item is pending litigation, we need to list it usually by title and case number. For anticipated litigation, that is things that have not ripened yet to a formal lawsuit or proceeding of some kind. We list that as potential litigation, and we need to report that in different ways.
Eileen, am I right? If I have a concept that should go in a closed session, I can make a request to the chair to put it in the next board meeting closed session, and it can be considered to be put in.
Generally, that is correct, yes. I mean, it has to be a proper closed session topic.
yeah, there are only a few items that are allowed in closed session, but, okay,
Well, I think we've made President Superintendent aware of
right.
this issue. And I think we've given him enough information that he's going to come up with something that will accommodate our concerns.
And that might happen prior to his evaluation, but it also could be a goal in an agreement from the president's evaluation.
Either way, he's listening.
Right. Okay, so we're good. Everybody okay, moving on? All right,
Yes.
so let's go to the open-ended questions, and these are the ones where I had the synopsis up on the PowerPoint, but I wanted you to read what everyone said. These are from your
funny.
fellow trustees about the greatest strengths. And those, in reading those, you are following a lot of best practices in your strengths and also in your accomplishments. So I'm going to take us down to where the board can improve. You know, when you do an evaluation of someone, you say 50,000 great things, and then you say one thing they need to improve on, and they go home and think they had a bad evaluation. But, but what we really need to talk about are the two last questions, because those are the ones that could lead to goals. And so in the ways the board can improve, quit making public comments regarding what they think the college should consider pursuing. I like how this one was listed because it went on to say it's appropriate to have those opinions, but we need to talk about them together before we give a direction. And so that's totally appropriate, and staying out of operations. And then there was a comment that you improved a lot over last year, that you need to set clear expectations of the president. And we've talked about a couple of areas where it was unclear already. And that'll be a good thing to remember when you do the president's evaluation. We've talked about the onboarding new trustees, the second to the last bullet. And then The last one, we kind of a little bit, but attention to public perception. I love how whoever wrote this said this. Remember, we are elected officials and that carries a burden of behavior that reflects on the college. So we had a little discussion about that, but to be sure that you always remember that. So if you could go to the next page, because that's where you might pull some ideas. One or two most important things you need to do to improve your board. You have 5 bullets. The board members should not be references for employees. It causes undue bias towards that employee perhaps, so you might consider that. And if you agree to it, you might even put that into your code of conduct or your standards for board operations. And then the second bullet, better communication and respect from the president. That one should go into the president's evaluation. But the second one under that bullet was about process for items on the agenda. And I think we're going to talk about that again in best practices, but you should clarify what your process is and put it in policy if you don't already have that. And then making a collective commitment to doing what's in the best interest of the district and no individual interests or bias. It's hard, but that is an expectation of trustees, that you think of the common good. You take off your individual hat when you become a trustee and think of the common good of the college. So 3 to 5 issues that you think should make priorities for the coming year. I would like to just give you a couple minutes to read those because they're all over the board and I don't want to just read them to you. And then if you could just underline if there are some that jump out at you that you think you might want to do a board goal. When we do the board goal at the very end, we'll come back to your list of what if there's anything from here that you would like to add to it. So I'll give you about 3 minutes. So I'm going to just make a couple comments to help bring this part to a close.
Okay.
And the first one is that you did a really good job on the evaluation. You gave it thought. You can tell that. And I think some good comments came out of it. I would encourage you next year when you do your evaluation to make more comments, because you can see that you learn more from the comments than you do from the actual ratings. So if you would take the time to do that. But I'd ask you now, do any of you have any closing comments for the evaluation piece of this?
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think, in comparison to last year, with the exception of a few, items, I think there's a positive trajectory. I think for the most part, the board has a really good working relationship. And I think, the relationship with our superintendent president, has improved over the last year. I think the college is moving in the right direction. We now have a full-time executive cabinet, and we're working on the rest of our leadership team. So I think the college has been stabilizing under the leadership of, our superintendent president and, this board subsequently. So, I feel really positive.
Great. Any
I'd like to make a comment on that. To add to that is that it's easiest for a CEO when the board is unified, or when the board's directions are clear, and when the board is not impeding on operational or operational outside the campus either. So it's made it really easy to be able to do our jobs, and that's why I think you're able to see the college moving in the positive direction as fast as it is. So thank you to all of you for your support.
Great.
And multifaceted. And I'm pleased to see that our president CEO has stepped up his game from back in January. And he continues to improve, and that's the best we can ask for.
Great,
And out of all of us, I'm still improving in my roles outside of the college.
great.
And
Thank you. Good.
I think, for being how long, Val, as president?
First time.
It's from your start.
Start a year and a half. That's
So I want to just commend you because it's a tough job. It is, and you have risen to that position. And we, as old trustees that we are, we forget that it's just been 1 year, and we all have to put that in perspective sometimes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Val.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate or agree with some of my colleagues' comments. The communication aspect is so critical, and consistent communication that is where the communication is something that each of us receive, and that it's the message is the same to each of us, not different to individual trustees, because that really creates a bond of trust. Uh, we don't have to like what the message is, and and that's okay. But we'd rather have the message so that we can work on things together.
And you won't know the message unless you listen. And one of the strengths that I think Val has is that he listens. You listen. And that's how you build trust, that you know someone is listening to whatever it is that you have to say, so that you have confidence to share more. So I think we've made a lot of good progress.
Amen.
I'm going to say something about my fellow board members. I'm still amazed. None of us got together and says, "Hey, Joel, I like you. Let's work together." we were all elected by individual groups of people in the valley here and says, oh, my group says, I like Mark Meyer better than anybody else. I'm electing him. Trustee Sanchez Fulton says, I like her in her area. Now we're thrown together. We have diverse backgrounds, opinions, and yet we all seem to have this level of trust and respect for each other's opinions, but also strange, odd personalities. And I'm in that boat, the strange, odd one.
Awesome.
Captain Meyer.
Captain Meyer. And I have another boat coming up next year.
That's great. And you're going to make this next part. I can actually say while I was watching the board meeting, I kept cutting slides. You won't believe it when you see how many I have, but I kept cutting them because I thought you guys are going to be so tired. By the end of the day, you're not going to want to sit through all this. And some of you have been through it. But just hearing what you've said is going to allow me to go quickly through some of them anyway, because you asked me to cover best practices, so I'm going to, but I'm going to go quickly through some of the slides because what you just said shows me that you already know a lot of this and you're already doing it, okay? So with your permission, I'll move into best practices.
Okay.
And do you need to take a little break or are you okay?
No,
Okay.
wrap up.
Let's go. So you have a handout. It says these 9 things that you have to do as your role and responsibility as a trustee. I'm going to let you read that. But what I learned from my discussions with you is this: you expressed respect for each other, respect for the president, everything you've just said now and more. And it made me feel really good about what you're doing here at College of the Desert. Not that that matters, but I'm an outsider looking in, and it's nice when outsider sees that. So we want to talk just for a minute about fiduciary duties. It's the overarching duty of all trustees. If you look up fiduciary duties, you're going to see that these are the 3 duties that you are responsible for as a trustee. The name trustee comes from the Latin fidere, and that means to trust. And you just finished saying how important trust is in your relationship. And it's important that you also act as trustees for the people that elected you and that you serve in this community, even the ones who did not maybe vote for you, okay? You're fiduciaries who hold this institution in trust for the people who are coming in the future. These are the duties of care, loyalty, and obedience, and you have a handout on this too, so I'm not going to read this to you, but it's important that you understand these are what overarching you're responsible for, and if you do these, you are going to be great trustees if you aren't already. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to send a PDF of this PowerPoint to you so you have it if you want to refer to anything. So don't feel like you have to take notes. You're going to get the PowerPoint, okay? I'm actually going to send it to Joy, and then she's going to send it to you, okay? Or Tom. Okay, so the last duty we kind of added is a duty of stewardship, just because you are stewards of the college. You have the responsibility to protect, advocate, support, and leave the college in better shape than you found it. That's what you're trying to do as trustees. And from what you've said, you're all unified about that. You derive your authority from the Ed Code of the state of California, the Constitution of the state of California, rules and regulations of the Board of Governors, state laws, district policies, and you're responsible to understand the Brown Act, act in accordance with that, California Public Records Act, and ACCJC standards, especially Standard 4, which is governance and decision making. And you know that really well because you had some sanctions on that and you've resolved them. These are just, I'm not going to read all of these because you mentioned most of them, but it's really important that you understand that you do have all of these responsibilities as trustees. You have written some of those in your board policy on roles and responsibilities. We're lucky in California because CCLC gives us standard policies that we can either add to or not. And then we create our own APs for those. But those are in compliance with all of the laws that I mentioned before and with Title V Ed Code. So these are the responsibilities of the Board of Trustees. And you don't do this alone. You have the president's roles and responsibilities because the president and the board are a team. Okay? So onboarding of new trustees, I would usually have you talk about this. I'm going to make this quick and not have you talk about it. We have already talked about this, but I will again say this is something that I think you'll want to work on for next year. This is something that I'm going to apologize right up front. This is board decision. I'm going to get into policy right now, and I promised Mary that we would be doing this. Do you go by Mary or Mary Jane?
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane. Okay. So Mary Jane, I promised we would be getting into this, and I want to take a few minutes with this because it is one of the most important jobs of the board. You are a policy governing board. You govern through policy, and you as a full board approve policies. Broad statements, define and delegate, and set parameters. Okay. The next slide is my apology to, no, it's not. This slide just explains that there, again, you're in partnership with the president. The board has a role and the college has a role. Board doesn't usually do policy by themselves. You frankly don't know enough, don't have the expertise in most of the areas. And again, CCLC helps us stay in compliance with Ed Code Title V and all the state laws. So you don't have to, but it comes to you for final approval and discussion. And it's the responsibility of the college to make sure you have all the information you need when you make the policy decisions on certain policies. And here's my disclaimer. This is to the staff primarily who've worked so hard to have a great process for defining policy and procedure. But every college does it differently. John F. Kennedy said it better than anybody I've ever seen. There are very few issues in life where all the truth, all the right, and all of the angels are on one side. There's different ways to do this. There's different perspectives that have to be heard. And I'm going to talk to you about a best practice here that is not congruent with the way that you do it at COD. And I'm going to encourage you to look at it at least and decide if you want to do it differently or not. There are really two types of policies. One is the board internal governance policies, which really are the board's. This is how you act, what your rules are, what your roles and responsibilities are, how you're going to elect your officers. That's the board's responsibility. Your APs that go with those policies are the board's responsibility. They are not the college's responsibility. They are the board's, okay? They usually follow a different process than all of the other hundreds of policies. Those other policies on HR, financial, student services, instruction, all of those policies, the college should own. They bring them to the board. They suggest revisions. We get updates from CCLC. Those are the colleges to bring to the board. The board reviews them. The board can have input, definitely, but you're not usually the initiators and you're not the experts, okay? Your policies follow the same process, okay? And I don't think I can go to the link, but your policy on policies is 2410. I read it, and it basically says that you follow the same process for both your internal governance process policies and your board policies. I saw that today at your board meeting because it was a consent item, and internal governance policies really should be discussed by the board first. If the college has issues with it, they can bring those issues to the board. But again, I'm saying this as a best practice. If something else works better for you, then you can do it that way, but just understand that it really is the board who determines the internal governance policies and procedures. When I work with colleges on their internal governance policies and procedures, I encourage them not to have APs, because for those 2000 levels here in California, you would want APs and BPs to come to the board for approval. Most APs don't come for approval. They come just as an information item because they're procedures to implement board policy, and you shouldn't care about the how. You stay at the what level, okay? But for your internal governance policies, if you need a procedure, which I very much discourage, that should just be written into your policy because it has to come back to the board anyway for approval, or it should. Okay, so that's one area where I really strongly encourage you to at least look at it with the expertise from the college, especially the people who have worked so hard to develop this process, and talk about how you can revise that process if you want to give the board a little more autonomy and authority over your internal governance policies. Okay?
So when you're talking about board policies are, the ones you're talking about are specifically talking about chapter 2, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then those board policies, when they're discussed, but they're also taking language directly from CCLC. So those
Right.
are legal requirements. What latitude is there to change board policy?
If they, well, there's always the latitude to make it personal to your district, okay? Not to change, not to do anything that's gonna affect the law, okay? Or like there's some things in code of conduct or board conflict of interest that are straight from the law that the board, that trustees can't do. But you might even have some other things that you add that are your expectations of your trustees that could go into that policy. It's not taking something away that's required by law, but it's adding as a board saying, hey, we also want to commit, give you an example, to adding our affirmation of service to this policy. It's not anything against the law, but it's something you're doing in addition. And you can add that right to your policy so that it's written, and it would have to be taken away by a future board. Okay? So that's a really good question, Val. But and I'm not discounting what CCLC does at all. I'm just saying that the process that it should follow for the internal governance policies is that it goes to the board first for their consideration and for their review.
That's
Okay?
what we do during the first draft.
Pardon?
That's what we do during the first draft.
Well, then this isn't right. This was from your website. It says it goes to executive cabinet first,
Correct.
then to college planning council, and then
Mhm.
as a first read to the board. But if you're saying
Sorry,
it
I meant
goes,
first draft, I meant first read. Yes.
what's that?
I meant first read, I'm sorry.
Oh, absolutely. First read, like all of the other policies, the board gets 2 reads, right?
But
So
I
this
thi-
is following
I
the same
think the point
policy.
is,
as the
by
other
the time it
policies.
gets to the first reading, the board has had no vision or input into
Thank
that.
you. It hasn't gone to the board, Val, internally. She's saying that the board internally has to look at, then it goes to executive.
I'm not saying has to. I'm saying it's a best practice that the board takes the responsibility for their internal governance policies. Okay? It's not very many policies, and there's not much leeway, like you said, on most of them. But there are a few where there's an opportunity for the board to really make them their own and to understand what they say. Because the most important thing about board policy, if you look at this slide, is you have to understand them and you have to act in a manner consistent with them. And that is primarily your board internal governance policies. And if somebody else is doing all of the review and rewrite, and you only see it in a consent item, to approve, it's just, you just don't have the buy-in that you have if you're the ones who are revising the policy.
Can we go back to the last slide? I wanted to ask a
Sure.
question. So I see the executive cabinet review, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe what happens typically is CCLC may come out with an update, and it goes to executive cabinet and they review the update, and then they redline an existing board policy with changes from CCLC. I do know that the College Planning Council, it is an information item, so they don't engage. And then it does come to the board with those CCLC revisions. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you would be saying that the board piece would come first, but then if there is a CCLC revision, we almost need staff engaged, sharing with us what those revisions are
You
being
need them
recommended.
to make that that red line um, version of it, right?
And so I guess I would ask the superintendent president, with the executive cabinet review, is that merely making the red line revisions during that review, or is it broader than that?
No, we stick to CCLC's recommendation. As a matter of fact, that's what the first question we asked is, are these CCLC recommendations or is this legally required? And then we move on from there. We typically don't touch, typically I also have yet to touch a board policy in chapter 2 outside of the required language. Eileen, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do, and Debbie, you've done a really good job delineating this, but I want to emphasize when you talk about the board being involved in the drafting and the formulating of procedures, you're talking only about the 2000s, chapter 2, the one that is entitled Board of Trustees.
Absolutely. Only the
Okay.
2000.
Because and I agree with you. I have no problem with what you've just said as it applies to chapter 2. But if the board is to become involved in to attempt to become involved in drafting and formulating and initiating procedures for the other chapters, that would be micromanagement. That would be getting too involved in operational detail, which could have an accreditation implication.
That's why I prefaced it by saying the expertise for all of the other ones is in the college. It's not with the board. But the ones that govern the board, and but you could also do there's so many ways to address this. That's why I started with the John F. Kennedy quote. It could be as simple as revising your policy to say, executive cabinet will review mandatory changes by CCLC and they'll be sent to the board for consideration and approval. But it just takes chapter 2 out of the other process because the board has authority over chapter 2. It should not be the exact same policy as the rest of it. Clarifies too that the board shouldn't be interfering with the other ones, that the board's expertise is not in HR. Even if you have a person on the board who's an HR director at their organization, in this job, they're not the HR.
That's right.
So it really clarifies that the board shouldn't interfere, initiate, unless there's something that they see that's drastically wrong with the policy, but then they do it through shared governance, not by saying, I want this changed. It's a suggestion through shared governance and comes back up through the process to the board for approval. So there's all different kinds of ways that you can do this, clarifying in your existing board policy or creating a separate process that chapter 2 follows, or however you want to do it, or leave it the same, but with the understanding that at least chapter 2 probably shouldn't come as a consent item. It probably should come as.
And just for the board's clarification, I learned a long time ago, strategy eats, culture eats strategy for lunch. And we have angels that exist in the participatory governance realm. This change would be very different for them. So it would take a lot of discussion and take a lot of discussion. It would be something that we could do just like that. And I wouldn't recommend that.
And that's a really fair point, because if it's been done this way forever, then I would start with smaller, than just totally changing it. But at least clarifying that.
So this was done obviously years ago under the shared governance.
Yeah. Been in place for a long time.
Been in a place for, but it should not have been.
Well, and it's not like should and shouldn't. It's just the board does own the 2000s.
Yeah.
Just like the college would not want the board to tell them how to do instructional policies or student services policies or HR policies without the input from the experts in that area.
You're bringing up a recent point, actually, with the board policy that I'm thinking of. Uh, So, well, first of all, I think that when we get it as a second reading, it's not an information, it is an action item, not a consent item. That's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is, I am aware of a board policy that came forward that was not consistent with Ed Code and CCLC. It narrowed the board's policy when it was brought before the board, and then it was changed by the board during the meeting. So I've only known of one example of that since I've been around the district, but I see where that could happen. So,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
definitely,
You know what
definitely.
I'm referring to? Yeah.
I could see us over time doing some incremental changes on this. For example, in our agenda, separate the board policy approval, whatever, from administrative policies. So it's clear delineation to the public that this batch is board policy, first or second reading, whatever it is, and then we go on to the other batch. And then as time goes on, maybe some sort of governance committee that inserts into the process before it even comes to us. But that's a conversation, longer conversation we need to have is, do we create something like that?
No quick fix.
And it should involve, because this is an existing process that you follow, it should be involved.
Okay.
Training at the CCLC, she has a packet and a training that I went through, phenomenal training on chapter 2 of the board, what we could do. And I think we would love to get a copy of that training. It's before the conferences that the executive assistants go to. It's like going over AP and BPs. Oh, Eileen?
Am I muted?
Yes.
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
And I used to hate it when my trustees would come back from a training and tell me we had to do something that was going to be just a real pain. And this one sounds like it might be way bigger than, than I'm thinking. And so I would totally not advise you to do this without involving the people who are involved with the way it's being done right now. Okay? Not.
And if
So
I
go
could,
ahead.
I really like Trustee Myers' recommendation. If we separated out chapter 2 as an agenda item under trustees. But remember, not AP, just the BP,
Yeah.
Right.
just for clarification.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. But if there are APs for chapter 2, those should come to the board. Even though the other APs don't. Okay?
There's some APs that should be the board.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. I caused enough trouble
Okay,
with
yeah.
that. So if we can go on.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so this is the affirmation that you already have in your packet. Another idea that I've seen and really liked at colleges is at the bottom of any official notice from the board, like when you announce your new president, you put the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience at the bottom, just to reinforce that you know what your job is. Just an idea that a couple of colleges are using. We were going to do a partner discussion again. I'm going to go through that because you have had enough. So high-performing boards, a group of people who work exceptionally well together with the CEO to achieve board and organizational goals, leverage their collective talents, expertise, perspectives, and skills to produce superior results. Stay at the big picture level, delegate clearly and powerfully, resist the temptation to get into the weeds, the how. You stay at the what level and tell the CEO what, not individually, but as a board. And then monitor for accountability, and the way that you monitor is by what the president through the staff brings to you to monitor. High-performing boards understand governance, think strategically, lead by example, and develop a strong board CEO relationship. This is the slide that you were supposed to have printed, but you'll have it in the PowerPoint, okay? Just want to reinforce that policy development, strategic planning, and advocacy are in that central circle, which require the board and the president to work together. It's not solely in either's category. Policy versus operations quiz. I have it for you, and I'm going to leave it so you can take it. And I'm going to give the answer key to Joy, and Joy can tell you what the answers are. I wasn't going to collect them and grade them, but it's just, do you think this is a board responsibility or the president's responsibility? It's a little quiz that I like to use, but I know I don't want to take the time to do that right now. I think it's just too late, and you guys have done a lot today. Next time, would you do your retreat on a different day so that
Yeah.
we're not so rushed? Okay. Key indicators of high-performing individual trustees, because high-performing individual trustees make a high-performing board. You prioritize being a trustee, make work as the member of the unit, et cetera. Understand policies, support the college, all the things that we talked about. These are some ethical concerns, but I reviewed your policy on ethics, and you address them all. Your policy is really good. I don't know if that's a CCLC sample policy, but if it is, it's a really good policy, and it incorporates all of these. But examples of ethical behavior: board honors confidentiality of all executive sessions. Individual board members do not make commitments on behalf of the college. Board members do not favor or protect one site or division of the college or community special group. Board members operate without conflicts of interest and honor your commitments that they make to each other and to the CEO. You treat staff and each other respectfully in all public settings, and hopefully even in
I have a
private.
concern on that one. I think staff and should also treat Board of Trustees in public. That's vice versa. That if
Absolutely.
you see someone that works at the college, that is, they see you in another informal setting, they should have that respect in
Mhm.
public as well. So
They
that,
should. They definitely should, but
but
right
the
now.
vice
you're-
versa, if a staff member disrespects a trustee in public, that's also, I think we should put that as a,
Well, but this is board
but I'm just saying
ethical
that that
behavior.
happens.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't happen here.
It happens, I'm sure, throughout the state with all the,
I don't know. I mean, if we do training with staff, we would definitely tell them that they need to respect trustees.
yeah.
But this training is for
Oh.
trustees, okay? But I agree with you in concept, definitely. There has to be mutual respect. And board members do not meet directly with union representatives while negotiations are underway, for sure. But even when they're not, you limit your direct contact. So there's just three more, and I'm going to go through it quickly. Board CEO relationship, communication, and the role of the board chair. Board CEO communication is a partnership. These on the left side, as I'm looking, it's you respect different roles, share common purpose. That's how you build trust. All of those things. And the bottom one, trust and no surprises. You see no surprises throughout my PowerPoint, because that's one of the things I think is most important. And then on the right side, the board's the single employee of the president's a single employee of the board. The president's role is to recommend, the board's is to authorize and approve. The board is managed by the chair. The college is managed by the president. Information sought by a single board member is shared with the entire board. Trustees act as a board only when they gather in their official capacity as a board, and the board's work is conducted when it's formally constituted to act, not outside of the board meetings. Was there something you needed to share, or is that?
No, my foot got caught on his bag.
Okay.
I
So
believe it.
this is the heart of the CEO board relationship lies with the chair. So these are keys to chair success. We do chair training at ACCT, but I know you've had some experience with that. But one of the primary duties of the chair is to help monitor the behavior of the trustees. You all have a responsibility to monitor each other's behavior, but the chair has an added responsibility. It's never the president's responsibility. If something happens, you can't put the president in the position where the president has to tell his boss or her boss that they're doing something wrong. They should be able to go to the chair and say, hey, I'm getting a request for this. I think it's getting into operations. Can you help? And the chair should be able to step in and help with that. And if it's the chair that's doing that, you go to the vice chair. But it shouldn't be the president going head to head with the trustee. It just causes trouble. Trustees are accountable to the public that they serve, but that's only every so many years when you get elected. The rest of the time, your primary accountability is to each other. Okay?
This puts the chair in a very unique situation with the Brown Act. So I go to the chair and talk about topic A. And then Ruben goes to the chair and talks about topic A. The chair cannot comment to either one of us about that because then all of a sudden three of us have this serial conversation. So that really makes it difficult for the chair to act and react on certain topics.
It would be.
It's just a comment I'm making.
Yes, you're right. But if it's a item that you're going to be taking action on as a board, okay? So if the chair is put in that position, the chair has to say, we're gonna have to talk about this at a board meeting because I've already talked to one trustee about it, okay? So,
But you don't know that before they start talking.
but as soon as you realize it, you stop the conversation. You can't stop it before, but you would stop the conversation and you'd have to say, hey, this is gonna make a serial meeting. We're gonna have to take it to, if it's a closed session item, we're gonna have to take it to closed session. If it's an open session item, we're gonna have to put it on the agenda. Okay? And Eileen, I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think you got it exactly correct. If it's an item, the test is if we have a majority of the board discussing, or deliberating on an item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board.
Okay, great. So this was going to be another scenario to discuss with each other, but I'm moving on to communication protocols. Effective boards discuss all of these and make sure that you're directing the president to provide communication in a way that you want to receive it. And different board trustees want it differently, and that's okay. Like if somebody prefers email, that's okay. Somebody prefers, phone call or text, okay. But when you're telling the president things like, you should be sending us an update every Friday on everything that you did this week, the president would not have to do that unless the full board directed the president and said, we need an update. Okay. So it's important to keep that in mind. A president could not respond to 5 different people giving independent direction. It has to be, and unless it's just something that somebody needs and the president can answer it. But if it's a directive to do something, then it needs to come from the entire board. Okay. Some of the other things there are handling community member concerns or complaints from members of the college. Can you tell me how you do that right now? Or at least what the best practice is, what you should be doing?
Typically what the board members would do is let me know.
Not you. I want the board to tell me how they handle it when they get a concern.
Usually the answer is, that's very interesting. Let me take that back to the college.
Excellent. And you know, you.
I don't even give them a name or a title because I would take it to the president, but usually it's the president delegates it down to somebody.
right.
And I don't know who that would be.
Right, and that's such a good answer because the president's your only employee and he needs to know what the issue is and he delegates it to his staff. Okay, so you don't go directly to any other staff members unless the president has said that, like, for example, during budget development time, the president might have your CBO meet with each trustee to go through the budget assumptions or whatever the issues are. But that's at the direction of the president. That's not at the direction of any individual trustee. So exactly the right answer. If you hear a complaint from external or internal constituents, your response should start with, we've delegated the responsibility for that to the president. It lets the person know, I know my job, and my job is not to solve problems at the college. That's the job of the president, and I know it. And if you want to still talk to me about this, I'm happy to listen. But I want you to know I'm going to have to I am going to be turning this over to the president. So it lets everybody know you're on the same page, clear communication, and you understand your job and you respect the role of the
That
president.
generally eliminates the conversation.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
They don't want to keep complaining to you?
Now, it's different, I guess, if your body language is, if you're going like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and so they think that they're drawing you into their discussion or their opinion, and that's what's dangerous.
Yes. And as elected officials, you want to be nice and encourage people and tell them, hey, you know, I understand, I hear your concern, but it's not my job to do something about that. Okay. Okay.
I just,
So,
for the record, I just want to make a point that I gave the A answer.
oh,
That was
and
A+.
do you want to say something else?
No, I think just kind of comment on the board. I think the board actually does a really good job of that.
Good.
I spoke up real fast because I've appreciated each one of them have forwarded me either an email or sat down with me to outline what the issue was. And then what I would do is I would refer to whichever vice president. And it's a great system and they're really doing a good job. The board members are having that communication with my office.
Perfect. That's great. And all trustees are following that process. That's fantastic. So here's best practices. Your email, and Eileen told my staff this at Barstow, even if you use private email, if you're talking about college issues, it can be subpoenaed. So you should use college email for college business when you're communicating with each other and with the president. The board communicates all requests through the president. Trustee communication with the individual employees begins, like we talked about already, with you telling them you know what your job is. And then you respect the boundaries of your governance role and limit direct communication with constituency groups. I want to just talk for a minute. This is a national survey that we did, just what the board expects, what the president expects, and what you expect from each other, but you're already doing it, so I'm not going to talk about that. But civility guide, this is just from an article. Think before speaking, focus on facts, focus on the common good, disagree respectfully. I saw this in your meeting. Be open to others without hostility, respect different views, and exhibit a high degree of collegiality. Here's an article, you can read this, but when you get the PowerPoint, the link to the article is on it. But focus on what can you do to promote a climate of civility. I love number one, assume the best. When you hear something and you think, geez, did that person really say that? You know, to ask follow-up questions, but assume right off that you either misheard, misunderstood, misinterpreted. Don't be automatically on the defense. Just ask them to explain because of the way you took it. Assume the best in each other, and I think you guys are doing that already. another discussion we were going to have. So here's the summary of best practices in governance. Honor your fiduciary duties, operate at the policy level, focus strategically on the future, create a culture of inclusion, partnership, and collaboration with each other by doing the things listed there, and with the CEO by doing those same things, and assure that the college meets the needs of the community that it serves. Essential practices, you're doing one right now, board retreats, although I would say you should do this on a separate day. And then study sessions, when you feel like you need more information on something, and you did it today at the meeting, the president said we can have a study session on that. That's fantastic. The board can request a study session, but don't make it an issue at the board meeting, just create an opportunity for you to learn what you need to learn. But all of these things
Comment?
Yes.
Why I love future agenda items. It's a time when the board could voice their concerns. I mean, we don't want it. We just have, let's say someone from the community emails. Remember, we're out in public. People call us, people email us. And we just have to, a lot of times. And that's why I say future agenda items, these are concerns. They're not just out of the blue. I think some people may think that, but I think there's concerns when there are immediate concerns on the safety of a student or a faculty member. I think it's important that we do address it in a timely manner.
Yeah, and those you would get to the president immediately. And still honor the rule of no surprises at the board meeting. If you're going to bring up something in your time for future agenda items, the president should have a heads up that, hey, I'm going to bring this up as a future agenda item and not be surprised. Okay. Okay. So, trust, I gave you this article the last time I was there, but last time I was here, I hope you read it, but it gives you specific things you can do to increase trust. You already have a good foundation of trust, but you do have a relatively new member and a returning member, and creating opportunities to build trust is phenomenal. So we're at the point, and it's 4:00, but we're at the point where we're talking about your internal governance goals. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to talk about it now? Do you want to I see people shaking their heads. No,
I have a recommendation. We're going to meet with the Institutional Effectiveness Committee in July. And I think this would be a perfect topic for us and be able to Trustee Meyer and Trustee Sanchez Fulton to bring back to the board as a recommendation for review. Was it Ruben? I'm sorry, I got confused.
We have traditionally put this after the regular meeting. And I'm thinking in the future, we should do a separate time and allocate for this. Believe me, I would love to do more.
I know. I totally understand.
Yeah.
I'm not taking it personally.
I have you know what we did long ago, and I thought was so wonderful for the Board of Trustees and for the staff. We did it like on, what was it, Saturday, Joel? We did a beautiful board retreat right there at the convention center. It was it was really nice. And it was a time where we could really talk, and it wasn't this fast. Right after a board meeting. This is harsh.
I know.
On a Friday.
Yes.
But, it would be nice to have it on its own, which we did do that. And it was really nice. I think we had another one at the embassy. Remember, this was several years ago, and it was very good to have that time.
I think that's something that we're going to do for our next meeting, and perhaps we can discuss very soon where we pick up from where we left off here, where we leave off here today.
Okay. The only thing is you probably shouldn't wait till then to set your internal governance goals unless you're going to do it soon. I don't know. But
It's good.
I think July would be soon enough, unless.
July is good. Yeah.
pardon?
We were gonna use our July meeting for institutional effectiveness
Oh, good.
subcommittee
And
to do that.
Okay, great, because you could do both then. You could do the college update to the goals. You did, whoever did it did a great update on what the progress was. And then on the internal governance, you could ask for the trustees to send you the notes that they've taken and then decide how you want to go forward on your internal governance goals. I think that's a great suggestion. Okay, but just don't count me down when you do that evaluation because we didn't finish this.
We won't.
Okay, so, when you,
When we,
what do you say?
I've already completed it.
Oh, when you guys get this PowerPoint, it'll have some ideas for just things that you consider in your internal governance goals, okay?
Okay.
But we won't talk about those now. But I do want to end with just one thing. Your accountability, again, I just want to reinforce that your accountability is to each other, that you are trustees, nobody else holds you accountable. It's you holding each other accountable, okay? And you're doing a great job. So it was a pleasure being here and.
Thank you. Perfect.
Will you be here or will you come back for us when we go through this process, or is this something that we?
What's that? Can I come back to do
Yeah.
another retreat? I can. You just worked through ACC.
bring back for institutional.
Oh.
Try that discussion.
Sure. If you want me to, and I could do it by Zoom if you want to do that. If you guys can talk about that and decide. You can talk about it and decide what you want.
All right. Well, thank you. That covers item 602, the wrap up and next steps for the evaluation. Thank you, Dr. DeThomas, for leading today's retreat. And it's comforting because you've seen the transition and you've worked with us and you've grown with us, and we appreciate you
Appreciate that.
very much. Mr. Burger.
Want to thank you.
And with that, we will adjourn the Board of Trustees special retreat at 4:12 p.m. Adjourned.